So, hi, he's Brian, and I have today a new podcast guest. So I would say, introduce yourself.
Hi, Florian. My name is Jana. I'm a senior product manager at heycar. heycar is a used car marketplace, and I've been with this company now for 2 years. And 2 years ago, that was exactly the month when the platform went live. So I've been with this company since launch, and it was a really exciting ride so far.
So, how did you get this position?
Yes. At some point, I realized that product management is a super exciting role and something that I really wanted to become a product manager. Yeah, let me maybe explain a bit of a story of my background or how I got there. I have a business background actually, and I studied innovation and entrepreneurship, management, these kind of things. And during my master's studies, started an own little startup project where now in retrospective, I can actually say that was the first time I was a product manager as well. So I was driving the vision of this company and defining the product. And then my first job was as part of an accelerator program, Startupbootcamp, or rather its mother company, which is Rainmaking. They're present or especially in Scandinavia. We were based in Copenhagen back then. And what we did there was loads of corporate startup projects, like on the intersection of corporates and startups. We did startup scouting, for example. We established innovation labs with these corporates, and many different projects. And one project was more building an internal product that helped us and other colleagues to work more efficiently. Don't want to go into detail. But at some point, one of my engineering colleagues said to me, "Oh, you're a really good product manager." And that's when I started looking it up. What does it actually mean? And I realized, wow, this is a really cool job. I read a lot about it. I talked to all the product managers I knew in my network back then, and then realized, this is exactly what I want to do. And this is how I, landed in product. And at heycar, I was always interested in mobility. And I found it a really cool challenge or opportunity to be part of a completely new venture and build it up with a great team from scratch.
So what does heycar actually do?
Yeah, so it's a used car marketplace. So it combines used car dealers, with people searching for a car. So typical listings, product, so there's the marketplace on one hand, and we're looking for new business models at the same time, experimenting a bit. So, for example, we're looking more towards how we can enable an online transaction. So instead of only generating leads to dealers, at some point, we see this trend of doing more of that online, and maybe at some point you don't even need to go to the dealer anymore, but you can purchase the car online and sign the financing contract online. It's another thing we're looking into at the moment. So quite an exciting challenge.
And one of the specialties about this whole thing is that like the heycar was founded by VW, like a big car mogul company itself. So what is your experience in this section? Do you feel it every day that like VW runs the whole thing or like finance the whole thing, or is it more something on the side? How's the experience for you?
Yeah, so you're completely right. So heycar was let's say initiated by a big corporation, by VWFS, so Volkswagen Financial Services. They had the idea back then to create such a marketplace because it would solve their own problem.
Okay.
And so their own problem of actually not having access to end customers. Mm-hmm. That's because there's always the dealer in between, right? So they're not really learning directly from end customers.
Yeah.
And also they saw a great market opportunity because the existing marketplaces, there are really established and big players. They are not so. Those captive banks, as we call them, so these OEM banks, they are not really involved in those marketplaces. So the idea of creating an own marketplace would solve the problem of getting access to those end customers and also sell their own financing products directly through that. And so many of us, of our colleagues, we are in touch with the investor, so to speak, or with people from VWFS on a weekly, sometimes even daily basis, especially in the beginning. So especially when the whole thing was set up, that's where we worked very closely with them to get all the market expertise, industry expertise from them. And then it's also important for us to not involve them too much, but to remain independent and autonomous. But I think it's a fine balance that we try to find.
What was the main tool to find this balance? Because I could imagine it's kind of interesting because on the one side they want to learn from you, on the other side you need to learn from them. So that's definitely an interesting relationship that like you have both worlds, teacher and learner or student all the time, or like potentially you have both the roles. So how did this work out, or didn't work out in the beginning, later worked out?
Yeah, really good point. I mean, why did they do this? Because they saw this market opportunity for themselves, but probably also because they want to learn how our startups work and operate. Right? It's interesting that they said we're not doing this internally or ourselves, but we have someone else do this for us and work closely with them. So I think it's also one of their goals to learn more about this more agile and startup-y, let's say, a way of working. And for the startup itself, for us itself, it definitely also comes with benefits of having this big corporate in our back. On the one hand, for sure, given the financial backing they can provide us with, and they can be very generous with that. But it's also let's say unfair advantage that they can provide us with in the market. So direct access to sales opportunities to all of their VW dealers, for example, in the beginning, we had direct access to them, which really helped to bring listings on the product, to bring stock on the marketplace, which is necessary in order to attract users then. And it's also a reputational boost, not so much for users. Well, actually also there, because when they see, hey, there's a big brand behind us, it provides more trust than a completely new and unknown internet brand, let's say it like that. But also especially in front of dealers, other brand dealers or other banks. We're also working with not only VWFS, but also closely with Daimler Financial Services and so on, and we're looking to expand this. So it's really interesting, actually, that even though VWFS started this, it has been a multi-brand platform from the beginning. This is something that came internally from this team who set up this company to say, this is the only way how we can see that this will be a successful product. Okay. To have it multi-brand from the beginning.
Was there persuasion ongoing to say, okay, like we should have other car companies in it, or was it just say, okay, cool, do it? Or didn't you ask and just said, by the way, surprise?
So so their original idea was to have it just for themselves, but when we came with solid arguments, they saw the point as well. Okay. Because for a single brand marketplace, I would say there are already solutions, and the only way that the original founding team saw success was by going multi-brand from the beginning.
Yeah, cool. So if you have your calls with your mother section, if you want it like that, is it more advisory position and also set up like that they are just, or also observer position? Or is it also that they just can say, okay, we approve that this has worked, and otherwise it's not worked in this way? How you how you handle that.
So there are different levels. So first of all, there is a board, a Beirat, that also is involved in approving ideas and making decisions in the end. But on an operational level, we are working with them in order to answer questions we have, to solve problems. We are integrating a couple of technical services also. So it's both. It's the more of a strategic involvement and also on an operational level.
Yeah. The next question is, because your company, you have a lot of people and probably you have a lot of problems, different problems. So how do you find the right person to help, and how you do set a course? Is it then booked for several times, or is it how you do this? Do you need to plan this ahead, or is it kind of simple and straightforward?
Yeah, so there was a learning also on our end that so in the beginning it was really hard to identify who to talk to over there, right? And we could ask a couple of people, and then they would tell us to ask someone else and someone else again, and then it took much longer to find the right person to talk to. And the problem was already solved by then. So what we ended up with, or what we suggested to them, is to have one single point of contact.
Yeah.
Maybe two, depending on the team or the topic, that is responsible for making us, heycar, a success. Or let's say making this relationship a success. So whenever we have a question on operational level, we talk to this one person, and then this person makes sure to get the information internally on their end.
Cool. It's also a nice phrasing. I like the phrasing a lot. It's responsible to make this relationship a success. That's a really nice phrasing for your job description. Cool. And that works better?
That works better, yeah. It was important for us to have a voice in what or how this person should be. It needs to be a person who also thinks more entrepreneurial, let's say, who understands this way how we as a startup work, right? Rather than pointing out obstacles, finding way of solving those. So it was important for us that this person has our spirit. Let's point it out like that.
Yeah, and it needs to come from the inside. Like, it probably needs to have a good network, knows how things work, knows probably a lot of people as well. Which is kind of interesting, because then you're starting to contradict yourself, because normally people which have like stay for a long time in a company and also know a lot of people, they are normally not entrepreneurial, because otherwise they wouldn't stay long in a big company. Yeah. So probably each team has their own contact, or do you have one contact for?
So this person is actually the one single point of contact, and she brings in her colleagues whenever necessary. Okay,
and she's the one contact for all heycar, like
on
for all operational
level. Yeah,
heycar.
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, and she's overrun or works out quite well?
It works well. It's also not that like every one of us approaches her. It's only certain teams that really need this close interaction. So other teams, for example, marketing, they don't have much interaction with them, or let's say less than others. And then they might have their direct contact as well, like for certain marketing questions. But usually this one person is at least always involved.
Yeah, cool. And now we talked about a lot of positive things. What would you say were the more negative things you experienced?
So it also comes with challenges, of course, and mostly around this relationship with the specific type of stakeholder, let's say. On the one hand, they have high, or let's say clear expectations towards generating revenue with such a product early on. They have maybe less understanding or less appetite for risk than, for example, a VC would have. And they also come up with ideas and requirements all the time. So especially for us product managers. And that can be, understood a bit, or let's say some people would probably see this as a big challenge or as a blocker, or they would rather, and this is what a product manager should do, would rather come up with their own requirements. But I think here it's important in order to make this relationship work, to not just block them away, but also also see some value in those ideas, let's say, or in those requirements, because they have also years of market experience, so there might be something in that idea, or that's at least how I try to see it, to really understand what is it actually that they want to achieve with that, to get to the core of this suggestion, let's say, and then form something out of it that also works for your users and for your business, not just accepting it as it is and just implementing it, but making sure that when implementing it, it also makes sense.
How do you handle it out of an agile perspective? So, you could say, okay, VW is your customer and your main person for you to build it, but you can also know it's just one stakeholder, and my main customer, my main stakeholder is my customer, which wants to buy the car. So how do you handle that? How is that set up?
Yeah. So from a product perspective, I have two main, let's say, groups I look at. It's the dealer and the user. So on a marketplace, it's usually two sides, supplier and demand, and this is who I'm focusing on. We have one product team that's only focused on the dealer perspective, and most others are focused on anything related to the user. So you see that there's a bit of an imbalance. When it comes to this, let's say, third type of stakeholders, being also being as a captive bank, also being a provider of a solution in here, or of a part of the product, the financing product, they are not just the investor, but also play a role. But when it comes to product management, not the first or the second role. So again, it's about finding the balance of making them felt heard, like we hear what they're saying. We try to involve them in, or at least make transparent how we make decisions and why we prioritize what and when, but not just ignore them.
Yeah, makes sense. And you probably run regular agile processes, like stakeholder meetings after 2 weeks or something, and then you go forward from there, probably, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this was also, I would say, much more present, especially in the beginning when product was still defined and when it was launched. And the more mature we get, the more independent we do this also, obviously. And and then they're mostly treated as any other stakeholder, internally or externally.
Cool. So out of my experience, out of my knowledge, is how you build a platform is you create a demand on both sides and try to fulfill the demand, and you try to scale it on both sides. Simultaneously, as good as is possible. So if you say you have one team on the dealer side and all the other teams on the customer side, what's the reason for that?
So we also have a sales team that only takes care of dealers, just from the product perspective. There is a team that only takes care of them, meaning that we also have a product towards them, like a dealer portal. But in general, the way we looked at this from this marketplace perspective is to put certain amount of offering on there. So in the beginning, we talked to so many dealers, we onboarded so many dealers that there was certain amount of offering, and then it was about, there was this moment where we said, wow, we have actually much more dealers now than we thought. We now need to focus on users. And that showed us, that there needs to be the balance at some point. But you start with a certain type of offering and then bring the users on there. And then once you have more and more users coming, then also more dealers get interested, and then they come from.
So you figured out that the users are the main point to grow, and like what's kind of the need to grow them?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't work if you only focus on them. Right? It's always both need their attention at the right time.
Yeah, cool. What are your challenges today?
So as I described a bit earlier, so there are some certain type of challenges of doing product management in such a setup, right?
Yeah.
Especially or exactly because they want to be involved, of course, or let's say the original intent of this was to solve their own problem, right? Rather than maybe a user's problem. And I think it's a challenge for all of us product managers here to make this a product-driven company, and not just a sales-driven company, or to find the balance here. And this is again also a process of both, or let's say of us product managers holding a strong position internally, and then also the management understanding this, the value of being a product-driven company, and communicating this again to the investors, to the board, and so on. This is a challenge, and it's a process, I think. I think this will make the difference in the end.
Did you have the feeling that like this challenge got easier over time? Because I can imagine like this is a constant negotiation or constant learning. Do you have the feeling it's getting easier, or do you think it will stay kind of like that?
So there are ups and downs. I would say, after showing initial success, it became a bit easier because they gained trust, and that we know what to do and we know how to do it. And then when rather difficult times come, then they want to be involved again. So it's sometimes this you need to prove yourself for them to realize the value. But then they might come back. So it's a back and forth and up and down.
It's interesting because like in the nature of a startup, it's like to fail and learn out of that, and then try and error, find out what works. So it's interesting, like say.
And this is, I would say, the general understanding of agile or of agility, that they want to learn and or pretend they want to learn. And then when it comes to the hard truth, this is maybe not always the case.
Yeah.
But they're also learning with us, and they're also learning that you can learn from mistakes. So here we see that they're more open towards these general agile methodologies and ways of working.
Yeah, cool. Where do you say will be the car mobile sector, like the transportation sector, in the next 5 years? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about mobility, so when people talk about all these trends, of course, starting with e-mobility or autonomous driving, and I actually think that autonomous cars are not that far in the future, maybe not 5 years, but I think in 10 years they will be quite normal. I'm really curious, actually excited for this time. For us, also, I mean, the sharing economy is an important topic for us as well, right? And I think there is a broad spectrum between car sharing and ownership of car, right? We see, so next to all these tech trends, we also see a change in user behavior and consumer behavior. So not everyone wants to own a car. Actually, less and less people want to own a car. What's more important to more people, it's the actual access to mobility. So rather usage than ownership. And car sharing is on the one extreme of this, or one end of this spectrum. But I think there are more and more ideas or business models popping up on this spectrum. For example, subscription services, or also private leasing as a kind of financing option is becoming more relevant. So these are things that we're seeing already now, and that will probably become even more relevant over the next months and years. And then the combination of all of those. So I think that platform businesses will play a much higher role, that, combine all of these single apps or single solutions, let's say, starting from car sharing to ride hailing to not only cars, actually also other types of mobility that we see coming. So making this a single user interface, I think, is one of the trends we will see more and more, and which will make the solutions successful.
Yeah, Germany is definitely an interesting country for cars. Like, I'm feeling like historically we love our cars. Like, we identify with our cars much or more than other countries. And it will be interesting to see how this transformation happens. So it's probably driven by digitalization. It's probably driven by upcoming generations, which probably don't think like that. Would you say it's one factor which drives it more in this direction?
Yeah, so you're completely right? We are quite special car people here in Germany. So I think these trends that I just described are probably more prominent already in other countries or other markets. It starts with financing or leasing of a car, which here is, especially leasing for private cars, is not a very prominent type of getting access, whereas in other countries it is much more. But I think it's a process that will take time. The question is how fast or how slow it will be. But you're completely right. So Germans are really peculiar about their cars.
What would you say does a young person need to do to become a product manager?
Yeah, it's interesting because there can be so many different paths towards product management. I see it here. I see it with other product managers I interact with, that they have completely different backgrounds sometimes and completely different stories of how they got into product management. And I think that, many of them didn't even intend or like on purpose wanted to get into product. I see this coming more and more now, with like more people understanding or realizing the value or how cool this role is. Let's put it like this, because I think it's such a relevant and important role in any startup. So whoever considers this to be a career choice for them, I think it's making clear that you really want this and why. And what helped me especially was to talk to all the product managers I had in my network, to understand how they got into it, to understand the required skills, how a day-to-day of a product manager looks like. Because I would say it's not an easy job. It can be a very fulfilling job for certain kinds of people. It's not for everyone. And then you can also look internally in where you're working right now to, find your own projects. So I would say product managers are the rather entrepreneurial type of people. So you can, when you identify a problem, or a challenge in your current company, just go there, approach people, and try to create your own product role somehow, or be part of a project where you can at least approximate this kind of role, where you can work together with engineers, with designers, where you can talk to users, understand their pain points, and without even having this title, trying to pursue such a role on a more project basis.
So would you also define a product manager like that? Did you say product manager's job is to define a problem and then to take the people with you to help them to solve it?
Yeah, definitely. I think it all starts with understanding your user, understanding the pain points, the needs they're facing, understanding your current product, weaknesses of your product, and then defining or coming up with concepts or solutions that solve these problems. So how do you come up with these? Or how do you understand these? There's always the data part, the quantitative part, by looking into, click behavior or other kinds of data you can generate through your current product. And then also, which I find also super important, is more the qualitative part. So talking to users, talking to potential customers, observing them, how they use your product, observing them, how they use other solutions, competitor solutions, or how they solve the problem otherwise. And then combining these insights formulating hypotheses out of these. And then the other exciting part about product management is creating concepts that could solve these problems, that could validate these hypotheses, and then also implement them, test them in a very lean way, working together with designers, with engineers. It's a very communicative role. You talk to so many people. We're in many meetings all day long. As a product manager, you make the decisions, you make the roadmap. So it's a very, let's say, versatile or manifold role, many different tasks at the same time. But that makes it such an exciting role as well. And you can really have an impact because you decide on your product. And then there is another really important aspect towards this role, which is more the people part of it. So I see myself as someone who creates an atmosphere where the rest of the team can work best, right? Where the designer can create amazing designs, where the engineers know exactly what to do, and to create a place where they can work efficiently and where they like to go to. I mean, for me, it's always super important that we have a cool team atmosphere, that people enjoy coming here. So next to building a great product that users like to use, it's also to build a cool team atmosphere where colleagues like to work.
A few special things you do there, like which is you do specially?
So, what are special things? So we try out many different things.
Yeah.
I always ask how the team feels about these new ideas or concepts or methodologies we try out, what they think of it, if they like it, if there's anything we can improve. There are retros. We have other kinds of meetings. I mean, it's always a balance of involving people, of making them feel involved, but not take too much time of them. So also it's a process for the team. I mean, it also depends on the types of people in your team, their personalities. Not everyone wants to be part of all the cool activities. So everyone understand how your team members' personalities are and what they appreciate.
So you do regular team events or something like that?
Yeah, we do. We started with like monthly team events, and I think this is quite unique also in our team that that we are friends also outside of work. And it happens sometimes that every week once a week we hang out after work. I think that's quite unique, actually.
Cool. Yeah. And the tech world is kind of like male dominated. Like you have a lot of men working in there. Would you say it made it different for you as a woman in this world, or how's your experience with that?
So it's definitely true that it's, one of many industries, I guess, that is where women are less present, let's say. I think one aspect is that So I've never felt like I'm in a disadvantaged position or anything like that, or very rarely, let's put it like this. But what I do see that's missing is, more role models, a support network of women that have been that are much more experienced in same situations. So what I've done is I've created my own support network. Let's put it like this. Like I'm really lucky to have great, very close friends who are in similar situations, and we support each other a lot. We talk about our careers a lot, about how we reflect about leadership, about what we want to achieve, and that really helps. So I think things are happening here as well, and we need to seize these opportunities. We need to push these opportunities. It's great that it's such a topic now that people talk about a lot, that it gets more and more awareness. And then in the end, I think it's really about everyone realizing it, both men and women, but not making it a big deal or a problem, but also seeing opportunities and chances in there.
Yeah, sounds really good. I agree. So, for educating yourself, you always said like you like to talk to mentors, to people to learn. What else for sources you have to educate yourself? For example, what are your favorite books?
So I read many product-related books, I would say, especially in the beginning when I wanted to start or to get into this role.
What was your favorite?
One really good business book that I think I can mention here, it's not so much product, but business or entrepreneurship in general, is The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. What I like about this book is that it's not just talking about advice or how you should do things, but he talks about also after setting it up about all the fuck-ups, about how hard things can be and how he overcame this. So I thought it was a bit more, down to the actual truth. And so many interesting insights I took out of this book. So I read books, I read podcast, or I listen to podcasts, I read blogs and so on. So I think there's really so much out there in the web and also in print, a lot to inform yourself. I think sometimes I realize also things are repeating themselves. So at some point it's also just about trying things out and learning by doing, learning by talking to other PMs and just trying it out.
Definitely. And my last question is, if you could go back in time to your 18-year-old self, what would you tell her?
I would probably tell her to not be afraid, to not worry too much or not think too much about next steps, about career, about the future. But listen to the gut more, try things out, stay true to yourself, try to really understand what brings you joy, and try things out, take risks, and don't be too afraid.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.